Okay, so hello everyone. This is C. Ashish Kedia and welcome to Chapter 2, Unit 1 that caters to law of demand and elasticity of demand, right? Okay, sir. So, friends, as you have already understood, that we will be talking about demand and elasticity in this unit. So, before I start this unit, you got to remember one thing which I have highlighted in my previous sessions as well, that whatever will be useful from the MCQ point of view or from the exam point of view, I will be highlighting the same in the yellow color or the yellow shade. So, keep an eye on that. Baki, we are starting and pay attention everyone, right? Before we start this unit that caters to demand and elasticity of demand, we got to remember something, that in this entire chapter, when you are going to think logically, you will always think from consumer's POV, consumer's point of view. Always think from consumer's point of view, because this entire chapter has been made keeping in mind the consumer. Question number one, sir, what exactly is demand? Acha, and by the way, what will we study here in this particular unit of demand and elasticity? We are going to be talking about, different factors affecting demand. We are going to speak about law of demand. We will be studying about the different demand curves. We will be talking about exceptions to the law of demand. We will be talking about elasticity and how to measure different types of elasticity of demand. So that is, very natural and general. Now coming back to the topic. Sir, what is demand? It is the, please remember everyone, whenever we talk about demand, there are two words that are associated with it: ability and willingness. Demand refers to the quantity of a commodity which the consumers are able and willing to buy at a particular price at a particular point of time. A very important context. Demand refers to the quantity of a commodity which the consumers are both able and willing to buy at various prices during a given period of time. So in order to be called as demand, both are necessary. So suppose if I say that, okay, today I want a Taj Mahal, the original one. So if I want the original Taj Mahal, yes, I am willing, but am I able? Do I have that many thousands and lakhs of crores? The answer is no. That is why, yes, there is definitely the presence of willingness but absence of ability. Similarly, if I have the ability but lack of willingness, so suppose I have had some kind of food at home. Now when I go out with my friends, they ask me to eat with them. Now, can I pay for that food? The answer is yes. But am I willing to buy that food? The answer is no. So it will not fall under the purview of demand. So for demand to exist, there are two concepts necessary, both ability and willingness. And we always talk about a particular point of time when it comes to demand. Now, what are the different determinants slash factors affecting demand? Friends, there are multiple factors affecting demand. I'll start with one by one. You know, number one is price of the commodity. So if there is a rise in own price of the commodity, think logically. If it is a general commodity, if there is a rise in its price, if there is a rise in the price of the commodity, tell me what is going to happen. People will find the product expensive, and if people find the product expensive, will the demand for that product rise or fall? Tell me. Obviously, sir, the demand for that product is going to fall. That is my point. So when price rises, quantity demanded falls, and this language is called inverse relationship. This language is called inverse relationship. Why? Because when price is rising, quantity demanded is falling. Dear students, this is what we call as inverse relationship, and the graph for it is plotted like this. That is a downward sloping demand curve. So demand curve is downward sloping or inverse in nature. Why? Because when price rises, think logically na, if a product becomes more expensive, the consumer's willingness to buy that product will rise or fall? Will fall. And that's what is the case in point. That is, when price rises, quantity demanded is going to fall, and vice versa. Other factors remaining constant. Remember, this time in January foundation 2025, there came a question key other factors remaining constant is another name for what? So remember, other factors remaining constant also means ceteris paribus. Ceteris paribus, imagine, question can be that easy. Ceteris paribus. Ceteris paribus means other factors remaining constant, meaning there are multiple factors affecting demand for a commodity. We have only studied one, which is own price of the commodity. So when there is rise in own price of the commodity, the quantity demanded is going to fall, other factors remaining constant, also called ceteris paribus. All right, sir. Now moving on to price of related commodities. Friends, when we talk about price of related commodities, there are two kinds of commodities we particularly cater to. There are two kinds of commodities we particularly pay special attention to. Number one is complementary goods. Number one is complementary goods and number two is substitute goods. Before I move on to the complementary and substitute nature of goods, remember when we spoke about own price and demand, when we spoke about own price and demand, we found out that there is inverse relation between the two. But let's talk about complementary and substitute goods. Friends, complementary goods are ones that are used together. That are used together. Complementary goods are the ones that are used together. Sir, are there any examples that you can, cite for our understanding? Yes, car and petrol. Assuming that it's not a e-vehicle, obviously. So car and petrol is a complementary goods. That is, they are used together. Ink and pen. Ink and pen. Complementary goods used together. Mobile phone and its battery used together. So if suppose there is a rise in price of car, the demand for petrol is going to fall. You know why? Because if price of car rises, then demand for car will fall, and if demand for car falls, then naturally people are going to demand less of petrol. Okay, it is not going to happen that okay, I don't have a car, but one fine Sunday I feel like buying some petrol. Come on, it is sense that if there is falling demand for car, there is going to be a falling demand for petrol. So in case of complementary goods also, there is inverse relationship. What does it mean? That is, when price of car rises, quantity demanded of petrol. When price of car rises, quantity of petrol falls. So what kind of relationship is seen in case of complementary goods? Inverse relationship. On the other hand, let's come to substitute goods. The generally cited example in case of substitute is tea and coffee. Substitute good means goods that are enemies, that are almost, replacing one another. Tea and coffee in beverages. So assume that price of tea rises, naturally demand for tea will fall, which we have covered under price of own commodity. So now if demand for tea has fallen, come on, tell me what will happen to the quantity demanded of coffee? Obviously, sir, quantity demanded for coffee is going to rise. So if price of tea rises, demand for coffee rises. Such a relationship is called direct relationship. For the first time in this topic, we have understood direct relationship or positive relationship. Positive relationship means rise in one leads to rise in another, fall in one leads to fall in another, right? And that is case of substitute goods. So if we are to summarize whatever our understanding is, so our understanding is that if it's own commodity, there is inverse relationship that we tend to see. If it is complementary goods, then it is inverse relationship that we see. And if it is substitute goods, it is direct relationship that we see. Substitute goods, direct relationship. Inverse relationship in case of complementary goods, inverse relationship in case of complementary goods. And for substitute goods, there is a direct relationship. For substitute goods, there is a direct or positive relationship. As I told you, pay attention to the parts I am highlighting. Those are very important for the examination perspective, right? Moving on. Third point is disposable income of the consumer. So we are discussing factors affecting demand or determinants of demand, wherein we have been able to already cover two of them. Two of the factors affecting demand we have already studied. Number one was own price of the commodity, wherein we understood there was inverse relationship. Then we moved on to the second point where we spoke about related commodities. In related commodities, there were two categories: complementary goods and substitute goods. In the case of complementary goods, there was inverse relationship. In the case of substitute goods, there is a direct relationship. All right, sir, it's clear. Moving on to disposable income of the consumer. Friends, when we talk about disposable income of the consumer, it also depends on nature of commodity that we are talking about. So here, what I'll do is I'll basically categorize it into three main heads. The nature of commodity portion, I'll classify it into three different heads. Number one is a normal commodity like cloths, right? Like cloths, this cloth that I'm wearing, normal commodity. Then there would be inferior commodities. Inferior commodities means products of low value or low quality. And then there are inexpensive necessities. There are inexpensive necessities. I'll classify each one, don't worry. So friends, if you're talking about a normal commodity, let's say clothes, tell me a simple case. If my income, if income rises, if my income rises, if income of a consumer rises, what is going to happen? What will happen to the demand for clothes? Naturally it's going to rise. So in case of normal goods, there is direct relationship. Direct relationship means the rise in income will lead to rise in demand for clothes or normal goods, whatever the normal goods you can think of. And fall in income will lead to fall in demand for clothes. So if we talk about normal goods, if you talk about normal goods, there is direct relationship between what and what? Between income of the consumer and the demand for the commodity of normal commodity. Moving on, inferior goods. Now friends, suppose there are two grades of rice, grade A and grade B. Just assuming grade B is an inferior quality, grade A is a superior quality rice. Now tell me something. A consumer who comes from a low income background, what would they be naturally consuming? Sir, they would be consuming quality B. A rise in the income, a rise in the income, a rise in the income would lead to what? A rise in the income of the consumer would naturally lead to fall in demand for inferior commodity. Because think of it this way na, if my income has improved, dear students, then why would I continue to buy inferior commodities? I will upgrade my lifestyle, I will shift to better commodities. That is what I'm trying to convey here. So what I'm trying to tell you here is that in case of increase in income, if the income rises, people shift from inferior goods to better quality goods, so the demand for inferior good falls. So the case in point is there is inverse relationship for inferior goods. So there is inverse relationship. Remember something, direct relationship is also called positive relationship, inverse relationship is also called negative relationship. Direct relationship is also called positive relationship, inferior relationship or inverse relationship is also called negative relationship. Yes sir, we have understood this. In the case of normal good, there is direct relationship. In the case of inferior goods, there is inverse relationship. But if you talk about inexpensive necessities, friends, if you talk about inexpensive necessities, which is our third category, you know, in case of third category, there is no relation whatsoever. Sir, but what is inexpensive necessities? Please try to explain. Friends, inexpensive necessities is, let's say, matchbox. Suppose you need to buy a matchbox. So if your income increase, or let's say a packet of salt. So if your income rises, you tell me something, friends. If your income rises, will you start buying more of salt? No, sir. And if your income falls, would you start consuming less salt? No, because salt is an inexpensive necessities. So how much will you consume? You will consume exactly whatever your requirement is. Yes, sir. We have understood. So we have classified income under three categories. Number one is for normal goods. In the case of normal goods, there is a direct relationship. That is, a rise in income would lead to a rise in quantity demanded for the commodity. In the case of inferior goods, it is low quality goods. So when there is a rise in income, there is a reduction in demand for the inferior goods. So there is inverse relationship that we tend to see here. And if you talk about inexpensive necessities, there is no relation as such. You know why? Because even if your income rises, you are not going to consume more of inexpensive necessities, and you won't reduce it either if your income falls. So there is no relationship whatsoever. Sir, can we mark it? Yes sir, here it is. Normal goods are those that are demanded in increasing quantity as income rises. So there is direct relationship. Right now, inferior goods. For inferior goods, what happens when there is a rise in income? There is a decrease in demand. There is a decrease in demand. And then there are certain essential inexpensive necessities like cooking oil. Right? So in this case, there is no relation whatsoever. Even if your income rises, it doesn't mean that I will buy more of cooking oil. No, it doesn't work that way. Right, sir? We have understood. Fourth point is tastes and preferences. I won't speak about it much. If the tastes and preferences of consumers are moving in favor of the product, naturally the demand is going to rise. If the consumers start liking the product, the demand for that product is going to rise, and if the consumers don't like that product, naturally the demand for that product is going to fall. So taste and preferences is a very easy point, है ना, doesn't need much of an explanation that way. Sir, this bandwagon and snob effect, would you explain? Yes, I will come to it when I will be explaining the exceptions to the law of demand. So let's skip it for the time being, right? Next, consumers' expectation. A very good point. Factors affecting demand. Fifth point, consumers' expectation. So suppose consumers are expecting that in future, not today, come on, in future, price of a commodity is going to rise. So what would the consumers do? If they really need that product, and if they feel that price of commodity of that product in the future is going to rise, what will they do today? So today they will buy more of that commodity in order to, avoid buying it at a higher price at a later date. So if the consumers expect price to rise in the future, then the present quantity demanded is going to rise. Why? Because they expect that, price is going to rise. So why will I buy it even at expensive rates? I will buy it today at cheaper rates. Assume the opposite. So there is a direct relationship here. Now assume the opposite. If you are to buy a bag, okay, you are going to buy a bag, and you are feeling that price of bags in the near future are going to fall, and you don't need that bag, immediately. So what you are going to do is you are going to delay your demand. So present demand is going to fall because you are expecting future prices to fall. So your plan would be to buy it at a later date at a cheaper price. Yes, sir, we have understood this. And then there are certain other factors, but five major factors that we have studied are own price of the commodity, price of related commodities, income of the consumer, number three. Then we studied consumers' tastes and preferences. And the fifth one, expectation about future prices. What is the consumer expecting about the future prices, right? So if the consumer expect increase in future prices, present demand will be increased. More quantity will be demanded today. Understood, sir? We have understood this. Then there are certain other factors. For example, size of population. It is a very, self-explanatory point. If the population increases, naturally the demand is going to increase. Age distribution. So if there is more of youngsters in the population, the commodities consumed by youngsters, maybe cold drink, maybe soft drinks, will be more. And if there are more of old age people, then the quantity or whatever the old people consume, the quantity demanded for those commodities is going to be high. Third is the level of income. A society with high per capita income is naturally going to demand more of the commodities. A society with lesser income is going to definitely demand lesser. Consumer credit facility at interest rates. Now suppose if interest rates or if products are available at low interest rates, that is you buy on EMI and you don't have to pay much interest, the demand is going to rise because product is cheaply available. I can afford to pay it in installments. But if it is opposite, then the entire exercise would be counterproductive. Meaning, if interest rates are high, so if I buy a commodity and I want to pay it in terms of EMI and I have to pay high interest, then what do you think? Will I demand more or demand less? Obviously less. So if there is a rise in interest rates, the demand will fall. And if there is a fall in interest rates, the demand is going to rise. Sir, we have understood this. Now, what is demand function? Friends, I always tell one thing. Whenever in economics you come across the word function, it means a relationship. Demand function is a relation between demand and factors affecting demand. So what is demand function? It is a relationship between demand and the factors affecting demand. So what are the factors affecting demand? Come on guys, just now we have studied so many factors. Income, price of commodity, price of related commodities, so many factors we have studied right now. So the relationship between these two is called demand function. Here quantity demanded is the dependent variable and the factors affecting demand form the independent variable. Sir, we understand it. Sir, we understand this. Now, what is law of demand and who is credited to provide us with law of demand? So friends, law of demand is something that you have already studied. What did I tell you? If the price of own commodity rises, quantity demanded is going to fall, and if the price of own commodity falls, quantity demanded is going to rise, other factors remaining constant. Yes, this was basically spoken by Professor Alfred Marshall. Alfred Marshall gave the law of demand. So in case it comes up in MCQ, you are ready. So this is what is the law of demand. Can you please repeat it for us, sir? Yes, I definitely can. When price rises, quantity demanded falls. When price falls, quantity demanded rises, other factors remaining constant. Remember something. When I am saying price, here I mean not the price of related commodities. Here I mean price of the own commodity itself. Other factors remaining constant is also called ceteris paribus. It means that when you are studying price and demand relationship, when you are studying relationship between own price and demand, then the other factors that come into picture will not be taken. Why? Other then it would create confusion. Let me give you an example. When price rises, demand falls. Clear? But when income rises, demand rises. Now if both price and income are rising, what will happen to demand? See, you have gotten confused. This is the exact reason why economists say that when you study a relationship between one variable and the output, then don't take other variables into the picture. So when you study relationship between price and quantity demanded, assume that other factors are not changing, they are constant. Sir, we have understood this. Thank you very much. Moving on. What is a demand schedule? It's nothing, it's a table. So when you plot price, suppose I plot when price is 10, when price is 20, when price is 30, then the quantity demanded would be 1000 units, 800 units, 700 units. Such a tabular representation is called demand schedule. So it is nothing, tough. It's nothing tough. A demand schedule is a table showing the quantity of a good that buyers would choose to purchase at different prices with all variables held constant. That is other factors remaining constant. Just an example that I already showcased you above. Right, sir? What is a demand curve? When you plot the relationship between price and demand, remember, when you plot the relationship between price and demand, you get a demand curve. Remember, demand curve is a downward sloping curve. Demand curve is a downward sloping curve. Why is it downward sloping? Because there is inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded. This graph has to be remembered. It's a crucial part of your entire economics journey. Okay, sir. Let's talk about market demand schedule. So friends, when we talk about market demand schedule, in individual demand schedule, we talk about an individual consumer. When you talk about market demand schedule, you talk about demand by multiple consumers. So let me give you an example here. Suppose price of a commodity was 10, 20 or 30. Then the quantity demanded by Mr. A, who is my neighbor, would be 1000 units at price of 10 rupees, would be 800 units at price of 20, and would be 700 at price of 30. Naturally, the demand is going to fall when prices increase. This is called individual demand schedule. Why? Because here I am showing this entire behavior for an individual consumer, Mr. A. But there are lots of consumers in the market. Let's say I take Mr. B or Mrs. B, whatever it is. So price is 500, the demand is 400, and gradually the demand is 300. So there are many such consumers. When you add the demand for all such consumers at different prices, you get market demand schedule. So 1000 plus 500 is 1500, 800 plus 400 is 1200, 700 plus 300 is 1000. So when you add individual demand, you get market demand. When you add individual demand, you get market demand. So here it is. The market demand gives the alternative amount of commodity demanded per time period at various prices by all the buyers. Here is the key language: by all the buyers in a market. When you talk about individual buyer and plot a demand curve for that or a demand table for that, it is individual demand schedule. So here it is, the example that I just gave. So when you add up the individual demand tables, you eventually land up to the market demand table. Sir, we are understanding this. Sir, we are understanding this. Now moving on. One more thing you got to remember. Market demand also shows inverse relationship between price and quantity. Market demand also shows inverse relationship between price and quantity. Moving on. Moving on. Demand function can be written as Q equals to A minus BP. Sir, what does it mean? B represents the slope. B represents the slope of demand curve. B is negative because inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded, right? Because of inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded. Sir, we have entirely understood this. Now, rationale of law of demand. What does this mean? The category means, why is the demand curve downward sloping? Why is the demand curve downward sloping? Why is the demand curve downward sloping? This question indirectly means this. Or to frame it better, Rational of law of demand means that okay, when price rises, you are telling that quantity demanded falls. But why? Why is it that when price rises, quantity demanded falls? This is the question being answered. So every point that I am going to explain, dear students, you will find out the entire conclusion would be that okay, so price is rising, quantity demanded is falling. But how? We will be using a kind of circular fashion to arrive at this point. Remember. So let's come to it. Number one reason behind this inverse relationship is price effect. Now remember, from MCQ's perspective, it is very important to remember price effect is the sum total of two impacts. Income effect, price effect is income effect plus substitution effect. Price effect is income effect plus substitution effect. Price effect is income effect plus substitution effect. I know I have not explained the two, but just remember this. Now let's come back to substitution effect and all these things. Look, let's talk about this now. Suppose price of tea falls. Suppose price of tea falls. Then if price of tea falls, then quantity demanded of coffee is going to fall. You know why? Because coffee is a substitute, and if tea is becoming cheaper, then people will buy less of coffee and more of tea instead. So relatively, see, there was no change in price of coffee. There was no change in price of coffee. But despite that, because the relative price of tea fell, tea became relatively cheaper, and therefore coffee was substituted with more of tea. Coffee was substituted with more of tea. This is called the substitution effect. So see, what I have done here is I have told you this only, that when price of tea falls, quantity of tea rises. But here I have used as an intermediary coffee. Because the demand for coffee has fallen, so demand for tea has risen. Thing I have said the same only, that price of tea has fallen, so demand for tea has risen. So I told you that there is inverse relationship between price and quantity. But in order to explain this relation, we have used a substitute good in between. That is why this effect is called substitution effect. Moving on. Moving on. So as I told you, the substitution effect describes the change in demand for a product when its relative price changes. So what did I say? When price of tea fell, despite the fact that price of coffee was constant, coffee became relatively cheaper. Not because coffee became expensive. I'm sorry. Just because price of tea fell, coffee became relatively expensive. Not because price of coffee increased, but because price of tea fell. This is called relative change. Understood, sir. Understood, sir. Understood, sir. Sir, we have understood this. So there is in this particular case, this is substitution effect. Now we talk about acha. Remember, when will the substitution effect be stronger? When the goods are close substitutes like tea and coffee, and when there is low cost of switching. So it is not that there is a high cost difference between tea and coffee, so switch can easily be made, and there should not be any inconvenience. So it's not that ki coffee I am getting everywhere, for tea I have to climb up the Himalayas. No, just as coffee is easily available across cafes and across markets, tea is also easily available. So these three conditions should be satisfied for substitution effect to be stronger. Moving on, as I had told you that price effect is containing two parts, two subparts rather. One was substitution effect, the other one is income effect. Now what does income effect tell us? First of all, remember something, that when we refer to income, there are two kinds of income we talk about. Friends, there is something called as nominal income, and then there is something called real income. Remember that income effect has to do with real income. Income effect doesn't care about nominal income. The increase in demand on account of increase in real income is known as income effect. As I had told you, income effect has to do with real income, nothing to do with nominal income. Now let's come to the case in point. What I'm trying to convey here is that suppose, acha, by the way, what is the difference? Nominal income is the cash in hand that you receive. So suppose there are two planets, okay? There are two planets, okay? planet A and planet B. In both the planets, person has the same salary, rupees 500 in both the planets. Okay, done, sir. This is called the nominal income, the money that you are receiving in hand. But assume for the time being that price of commodity, average price of a commodity in planet A is 50 rupees and in planet B is 100 rupees. Now tell me something. In which planet will the consumer be able to buy more? In planet A. Because despite same nominal income, due to relatively lesser price, the purchasing power is going to be 10 units, but here the purchasing power is only going to be 5 units. This purchasing power is called real income. Understood, sir? So when there is high real income, it means high purchasing power. When there is high purchasing power, there is high demand. This is what is income effect. Sir, we have understood this. Next is the next reason why law of demand is downward sloping, or why demand curve is downward sloping, is because of law of diminishing marginal utility. Because of law of diminishing marginal utility. Sir, come again. What is law of diminishing marginal utility? Friends, law of diminishing marginal utility tells us a simple point. It tells us, law of diminishing marginal utility tells us, acha, first of all, what is utility? I need to, kind of rewind a little bit. Utility refers to the want satisfying power of a commodity. Repeat. Utility refers to the want satisfying power of a commodity. Repeat. Utility refers to the want satisfying power of a commodity. Come again. Utility refers to the want satisfying power of a commodity. So if a commodity is able to satisfy my want, it has utility. So suppose you all are watching this lecture in English. So people who are watching this lecture in English and those that understand English, this lecture will have utility for them. But for someone who doesn't understand English at all, or who doesn't understand English, I might be giving the best lecture on planet Earth. Still, it will make them no sense. So they will have little utility for this lecture. Exactly my point. So for something to have utility, it has nothing to do with its usefulness. It has only to do with whether that commodity is able to satisfy somebody's wants or not. So if I am having a, water bottle, okay, if I'm having a water bottle, and if this water bottle is able to satisfy my want, it has utility. If not, it doesn't have utility. Sir, I have understood this. Sir, we have understood this. Now, what does law of diminishing marginal utility say? It tells us that when we consume more and more of a commodity, our satisfaction derived from each additional unit keeps on falling. Let me cite an example. Acha, by the way, again, law of diminishing marginal utility was also given by Alfred Marshall. Law of demand was also given by Alfred Marshall. Law of DMU was also given by Alfred Marshall. Let me, explain to you this particular concept that I was just discussing. Okay. So let's say here it is price, here it is quantity. Okay. Here it is, acha, forget about it. Here it is marginal utility. Marginal utility means additional satisfaction. Okay, now when I consume 1 unit, I am very hungry. So for the first unit, I was able to pay or ready to pay 10 rupees extra. Let's say I am consuming mangoes. Okay, for the first mango, I was ready to pay 10 rupees. Why? Because I was so hungry. Now when it comes to the second unit mango, my hunger has rather been satisfied. Though it's not over yet, still I am ready to pay for that mango. But would I be willing to pay 10 rupees? No. Because at that moment when I was ready to pay 10 rupees, my hunger was at a very higher level. And since the hunger was at a high level, the willingness to pay was more. But if my hunger is satisfied or relatively satisfied, for additional unit of mango, I will be able to pay or ready to pay only 8 rupees. Let's come further. If I go to the third mango, yes, my hunger has relatively been satisfied. So now I will be ready to pay only 5 rupees. Now when it comes to the fourth mango, I will consume the fourth mango only when it is free. I am not ready to pay anything. When it comes to the fifth mango, my stomach is so full that if somebody is asking me to eat the fifth mango, I will rather vomit. So when somebody is asking me to consume the fifth mango, I will tell them that, okay, you give me the mango and now you give me the money. I will not give you the money. So there will be negative utility, negative marginal utility. Because now that product has become a pain for me rather than an enjoyment for me. So what do you see? As you consume more and more units of a commodity, the satisfaction derived from each additional unit is falling. When the satisfaction from each additional unit is falling, tell me, your willingness to pay for each additional unit will rise or fall? This is what is being explained, that as quantity rises, marginal utility falls, and if marginal utility falls, the willingness to pay the price will fall. So this is exactly my point. Quantity rises, price falls. Here I have used utility as a tool to explain the inverse relationship. Understood, sir? Third point that explains the law of demand is arrival of new consumers. When new consumers start entering the market, assume deodorant or perfumes. When perfume prices was rupees 500, okay, assuming, or 5,000, assuming that only rich segment were using perfumes. Now it falls down to 500 rupees. Now more of the people, the middle class, the lower middle class, would also be able to afford this perfume. Yes, sir. So the demand will rise further. Not because the existing customers are buying more. It because new set of customers have entered the market who could not afford the product earlier. Sir, we have understood this. So similarly, different uses of a product. Suppose milk. If price of milk falls, obviously the main use of milk is that people use milk for drinking. So quantity of milk will rise. But this is not what I'm trying to explain. What I'm trying to explain is that if price of milk falls, now in our house, people will start buying milk for making ice cream, for making different kinds of chocolates, for making cheese, for making butter. Some may even go to the extent of buying milk for bathing. Sir, we are understanding. So when price falls, people start using that same product for new uses. So the demand rises even further. Sir, we have understood this. So these were the factors explaining why the demand curve is downward sloping. Now, exceptions to the law of demand. What does the law of demand tell us? It tells us that when price of a product rises, the quantity demanded falls, other factors remaining constant. Yes, but when I explain to you exceptions, dear students, it is a particular case where you will see that a rise in price might lead to a rise in demand. Oh, that is why it is coming under the head of exceptions. And I would like to start from the point, from the table that I had left earlier. I did not explain that, so I'll try to come back to that point. There were two tables to explain the exceptions to the law of demand. Here it is. Number one is demonstration slash bandwagon effect, and number two is snob effect. Number two is snob effect. Pay attention, everyone. Friends, bandwagon effect means copying the crowd. Bandwagon effect means copying the crowd. I'll give you an example. Suppose you have a Samsung phone. Assuming. Suppose you have a Samsung phone. Now, price of iPhone is high. But you see, everybody in your friends group is having iPhone only. Yes, your Samsung phone is doing every work that iPhone can. But despite the fact that iPhone is at a higher price, so price of iPhone is high, but still, due to the herd mentality, that is because others have it, I also want it, the demand for iPhone still rises. This is called demonstration bandwagon effect. It is the number one exception to the law of demand, wherein you are buying a commodity because everybody is having it. Since everybody is having it, others also want it. That's bandwagon effect. Oh, interesting one, sir. So it's an exception to the law of demand. Why? Because despite having higher prices, the demand for that commodity is rising due to this herd mentality. This is also called demonstration slash bandwagon effect. But when I come to snob effect, it is just the opposite. Yes, it is also an exception to the law of demand, mind you. But here the logic is opposite. In bandwagon effect, I was buying something because others didn't have it. I was buying something because others didn't have it. But in snob effect, I am buying, फिर से, in bandwagon effect, I was buying something because everybody was having it. So I also wanted it. But in snob effect, I want something because others don't have it. I am buying something because others don't have it. So I kind of feel unique. I kind of feel a prestige value. So suppose somebody buys a Rolls Royce. So does the Rolls Royce take them any faster than other cars? I don't think so. But then, despite having high price, people demand more of Rolls Royce. That is the rich category, because they want to segregate them from themselves from the group. They want to show their status. This is what is called the status snob effect, the status effect, Veblen effect, or conspicuous effect. So in both the cases, the logic, what is happening is the same, that at higher prices we are demanding more. But in demonstration effect, it was because of that FOMO, fear of missing out. You know, I am recording this lecture, and at this moment in time, in India there is Coldplay concert going on. Half of the people don't understand what Coldplay is singing, but still everybody wants to be in that stadium where the performance is taking place. Why? Because others are going to, we also need to go. That is demonstration effect. Because others are doing, I also need to do it. So even at higher prices, I am going to buy more of it. But in snob effect, it's the opposite. It's the opposite. I will buy that thing which others don't have, even if it is at a higher price. So in both the cases, they are exception. At higher prices, we are demanding more. But in bandwagon effect, it is because others are having it. In snob effect, because others are not having it, I want it. Oh, sir, we have understood. Remember, this snob appeal is also called Veblen effect. This snob appeal is also called as Veblen effect, that I just explained. It is also called as Veblen effect, or also called as conspicuous effect. Here it is. When things are purchased because of prestige value, to show that we are different from others. It is also called Veblen effect or conspicuous effect. Here it is. I have highlighted everything. Next is Giffen effect. Giffen effect. Now, Giffen goods are another category of inferior goods, my dear students. Giffen goods are another category of inferior goods. In case of Giffen goods, what happens is, see how opposite the things are going. Conspicuous goods were luxury goods. Giffen goods are inferior goods. Those inferior goods for which rise in price leads to rise in demand. Sir, we did not understand. What exactly are you trying to say? So basically, it is named after Sir Robert Giffen, who was a Scottish economist, who, during the World War observed something very strange. There was British workers, and it was, World War time. So the British generally used to have two foods during the war. One was meat or chicken, that was kind of their party food, and the other was bread, which was their food for daily necessity. Like in India, we have this wheat or rice, right? Or dosa, idli, whatever it is. These are our regular foods, right? Now, what happened was, price of breads increased. So one would assume that demand for breads would fall. But what Giffen noticed was that quantity of bread demanded increased. Sir, why did this happen? Sir, why did this happen? I'll tell you why this happened. The reason was that despite the rise in price of bread, people realized that, okay, no more party. So whatever money they were spending on meat, they started investing that in bread. So compared to the previous times, the demand for bread rose even further. So these goods were named as Giffen goods. So Giffen goods are those inferior goods for whom, when there is rise in price, there will be rise in quantity demanded. Sir, we have absolutely, definitely understood this. Others are repeated, so I won't, waste time discussing this. Now, there is another concept called expansion and contraction of demand. Let me explain this. By the way, expansion and contraction of demand is also called as movement of demand or change in quantity demanded. Remember, movement is also called change in quantity demanded. Repeat after me. Movement of demand is also called change in quantity demanded. Yes, you with red specs, repeat after me. Movement of demand is also called change in quantity demanded. Movement of demand is also called change in quantity demanded. Come on. Movement of demand is also called change in quantity demanded. Movement is also called change in quantity demanded, and movement of demand is of two types: expansion and contraction. Movement of demand is of two types: expansion and contraction. Now, When, what is expansion? When the own price of product falls, other factors remaining constant, and there is a rise in quantity demanded, it is called expansion of demand. It is only explaining due to own price. And what is contraction? When there is a rise in price, there is a fall in quantity demanded of the own commodity, that is called contraction. Remember, in movement we consider the relationship between own price and quantity demanded, other factors remaining constant. If there is a rise in demand due to fall in own price, it is the case of expansion, and if there is opposite, that is contraction. One more thing I would like to explain you, one more thing I would like to explain you, that when there is expansion of demand, suppose I'll give you an example. Suppose price is P1, okay, quantity was Q1, all right. Now suppose there is a fall in price. If price falls, what happens to demand? So demand naturally rises, so the curve meets here. This is called movement. So in and expansion particularly, so during expansion there is downward movement along the same curve. Remember, in case of expansion there is downward movement along the same curve. In case of expansion, come on, there is downward movement along the same curve. Come on, in case of expansion of demand, there is downward movement along the same curve. Come on, in case of expansion of demand, there is downward movement along the same curve. Let me give you another example. Suppose price was P1, and now price rises to P3. Suppose price was P1 and now price rises to P3. Tell me what will happen to demand. Sir, naturally the demand is going to fall. So it comes here. And if you connect it, there is upward movement along the same curve. So remember, in case of contraction of demand, very important, in case of contraction of demand, there is upward movement along the same curve. In case of contraction of demand, there is upward movement along the same curve. Very, very important. In case of contraction, there is upward movement along the same curve. In case of expansion, there is downward movement along the same curve. Is it written in the book, sir? Here it is. In case of contraction, there is upward movement along the same curve, and in case of expansion, there is downward movement along the same curve. I have also showcased how. Yes, sir, we have indeed understood this. Now, friends, there is increase and decrease in demand. Remember, expansion and contraction is a different terminology. Increase and decrease in demand are the two types of shift. This is also called change in demand. Above I told change in quantity demanded. In case of movement, I said change in quantity demanded. But when I am saying shift, I, I mean to say change in demand. So remember, the two are different. They are not the same. Whatever it is, coming to the point. When we talk about shift, there is change in demand. And shift is of two types. Just like movement was of two types, expansion and contraction, shift is of two types, increase and decrease in demand. Now, dear students, when there is a rise in quantity demanded, sorry, when there is a rise in demand due to other factors like income, like price of related commodities, like consumers' tastes and preferences, own price remaining constant, then we call increase in demand. Oh, so in the case of movement, we were studying the relationship between price and quantity demanded, keeping other factors constant. In case of shift, we study the relationship between other factors affecting demand and quantity demanded, price remaining constant. Understood, sir? So when there is a rise in demand, but own price is constant, it is due to some other factors. Maybe because income has risen, maybe tastes and preferences are in favor of the product. That is the case of increase in demand. And if there is a decrease in demand due to some other factor, maybe own price remaining constant, that is a case of decrease in demand. Remember something, dear students, in case of increase in demand, there is a rightward shift of demand curve. Repeat after me. In case of increase in demand, there is a rightward shift of demand curve. In case of decrease in demand, there is a leftward shift of demand curve. In case of decrease in demand, there is a leftward shift of demand curve. Is that so? Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Understood, sir. Sir, we have understood this. As I had already elaborated, in case of increase in demand, as you can see, we are shifting towards the right. And in case of decrease in demand, as you know, we are shifting towards the left. So remember this, it is very important, right? Now, we have understood the difference between the movement and the shift. Movement takes place due to own price, other factor constant. Shift takes due to other factors, own price remaining constant. Okay. So friends, let's continue with elasticity of demand now. Sir, a bigger question is, what is elasticity of demand and how do we, understand what elasticity implies? So here I have a brief idea for you and then we will get into the numerical portion of it. Sir, so you mean that this portion also contains numericals? Yes, this portion also contains numericals. Okay, sir, let's go ahead. First of all, the heading is elasticity of demand. So before I start with elasticity of demand, let me give you a statement. The statement is that law of demand, come on, that law of demand is qualitative in nature. I have given you a statement which is very important for your exam. Law of demand is qualitative in nature. Sir, why do you say so? Why do you say law of demand is qualitative in nature? I say law of demand is qualitative in nature because what does law of demand tell us? Law of demand tells us that okay, when price rises, quantity demanded is going to fall, and when price falls, quantity demanded is going to rise. Yes, what does law of demand tell us? I will repeat. When price of a product has risen, that for a normal product, suppose this t-shirt that I am wearing, if it becomes more expensive, then the quantity of t-shirts that I'll purchase with the rise in price would be lesser. So when price rises, quantity falls, and when price falls, quantity rises. So law of demand is telling us the direction, but is it telling us by how much? Law of demand is telling us the direction, that is if price goes upwards, quantity goes downwards. But is law of demand telling me the quantity, the numerical calculation, that is if price goes up by 1%, by what percent will demand go down? Is law of demand answering this question? No, sir. Law of demand is not answering this question. Welcome to elasticity of demand. Elasticity of demand is a quantitative approach. Law of demand was qualitative because it was only talking about direction, not about numbers or magnitude. But let me tell you something. Elasticity of demand is quantitative in nature. Elasticity of demand is quantitative in nature. The reason I say elasticity of demand is quantitative in nature is because it also talks about magnitude. Elasticity of demand also talks about magnitude, and this is the reason I say that elasticity of demand is quantitative in nature. A very important MCQ question indeed. A very important MCQ question indeed. Yes sir, we have understood this. So remember everyone that elasticity of demand talks about magnitude. Now what is elasticity of demand and what are its types? Friends, elasticity of demand is the degree of responsiveness. What? Degree of responsiveness. Let me highlight it for you. As I had already told, whatever would be important would be, highlighted in the yellow shade. So let me do that for you. When I talk about elasticity of demand, it is concerned with the degree of responsiveness of demand to the change in its determinants. See, there are different factors affecting demand. That is what is the meaning of determinants. For example, price affects demand. Income affects demand, right? So there are different factors affecting demand. Suppose for 1% rise in price, demand is going to fall by 5%. So here we are talking about price elasticity of demand. Suppose by 1% rise in income, demand is going to rise by 6%. This is called income elasticity of demand. So elasticity of demand caters to multiple factors. It is talking about the degree of responsiveness, that is by how much demand is going to change. Elasticity of demand tells us by how much demand is going to change when there is a percentage change in any of the factors affecting demand. So suppose there is a change in price, and because of 1% change in price, by how much will quantity change? That is called price elasticity of demand. By 1% change in income, by how much will demand change? That is called income elasticity of demand. By 1% change in price of related commodities, by how much will quantity demanded change? That is called cross elasticity of demand. So what I'm trying to convey here is that here we are studying by how much will quantity demanded change when any of its single factor is going to change by 1%. That is the concept of elasticity of demand. Now coming to the most important of all, we talk about, before we talk about, here is the definition of elasticity of demand I just mentioned. Elasticity of demand is the degree of responsiveness of quantity demanded of a good to change in one of the variables. Variables means factors on which demand depends. Variable means factors on which demand depends. More precisely, elasticity of demand is the percentage change in quantity demanded, which I was just telling. By how much percentage is the demand changing when any of its factor is changing? Let's talk about it one by one. Number one is price elasticity of demand. So what is the definition of price elasticity of demand? It is the degree of responsiveness of quantity demanded to the change in own price of the commodity. Suppose I give a statement. Suppose when there was a change in price by 1%, let me give you a statement. When I say price, I mean own price of the commodity. So suppose own price of commodity increased by 1%. Suppose, due to which quantity demanded of that commodity fell by 5%. So by how much times do you see the impact? 5 times? How much times? 5 times. For 1% change in price, demand changed by 5%. So the impact was how much times? 5 times. This is called price elasticity of demand. 5. Okay, sir, we have understood. There are different ways to measure price elasticity of demand. Of course, we are going to practice some numericals for our examination perspective. But what I need to explain to you is that price elasticity of demand is the degree of responsiveness of what? Of quantity demanded to the change in what? To the change in own price of the commodity. So when price of commodity is changing by 1%, there is a certain change in demand. By how many times? That number of times is called price elasticity of demand. Understood, sir? Before I get into the calculation business, let me tell you something. Naturally, price elasticity of demand is negative. Do you know why? Because there is inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded, meaning if there is a rise in price, there is a fall in quantity. Since there is opposite movement, therefore inherently price elasticity of demand will always come negative. But when we present, first of all, how do we present? Normally we write EP. EP means price elasticity of demand. So when you compute, suppose price elasticity of demand comes to -5. Remember friends, when it comes to the presentation, we don't write in negative terms. We write in modulus. What does modulus do? It basically converts a negative sign to positive. So modulus EP is equal. Now as we come to the discussion on how do we compute, sir, price elasticity of demand, because meaning you have explained it clearly, but sir, the question is that how do we compute price elasticity of demand? So friends, pay attention everyone. When we compute price elasticity of demand, the formula is percentage change in quantity demanded by percentage change in price. Okay, percentage change in quantity demanded by percentage change in price. And I repeat for you all that price elasticity of demand will always be negative. When presentation is done, we always present it in modulus terms, in the positive terms. Coming back to the point, yes, but for sums perspective, we are going to use negative value. I will explain how, and everything will be clear. Just keep listening. See, suppose original price of the commodity was rupees 100 and price rises to, let's say, 140. Okay, so the question is, sir, you have told us that price elasticity of demand is percentage change in quantity demanded by percentage change in price, right sir? So you just told us, sir, that percentage change in quantity demanded by percentage change in price is the value of price elasticity of demand. Now how do we compute? But acha, just one more thing. When the price increased from, let's say, 100 to 140, suppose originally the quantity demanded was, suppose, 600 units. Suppose the original quantity demanded was 600 units, and because of rise in price, quantity demanded fell to 570 units. So original quantity was 600 units when the price was 100 rupees. Now when price increased to 140 rupees, the quantity demanded fell to 570 rupees, right? Now what they ask is now what they ask is that compute price elasticity of demand. Now what they ask is compute price elasticity of demand. So let me highlight it for you. Friends, when we calculate percentage change in quantity, how do we do that? Percentage change in quantity, dear students, is new quantity minus old quantity by old quantity into 100, right? That means new quantity is 570, old quantity is 600. So dear students, it becomes 570 minus 600 by old quantity. What is old quantity, sir? Sir, old quantity is 600 into 100. Understood, sir? So percentage change in quantity is new quantity minus old quantity whole by old quantity into 100. Sir, we get your idea. So divided by 6. Now friends, we solve it. It gives us minus 30 by 6. When it gives us minus 30 by 6, right? When it gives us minus 30 by 6, it approximately lands to minus 5%. Yes or no? Yes, sir. New minus old by old into 100. Understood, sir. Similarly, dear students, we compute percentage change in price. Okay. Similarly, we compute percentage change in price. Let me write it for you. Percentage change in price. So P2, new price is 140 minus old price is 100 by old price, that is 100 into 100. Sir, why do we multiply into 100? Because why do we multiply 100? To represent it in percentage terms, right? So here it is 40%. Right, sir. Now, having done that, if we kind of compute percentage change in quantity demanded was minus 5% and percentage change in price is 40% positive. So overall you see the price elasticity is minus 1 by 8. Friends, when it comes to minus 8 1 by 8, that is, friends, minus 1 by 8 is basically minus 0.125, I guess, right? You just do and you check. So it would be minus 0.125. So this is elasticity's actual value. But whenever the exam will ask, they will definitely ask in modulus, and we will write modulus EP is 0.125. Sir, we understand. This way we have been able to understand both the aspects. When we write without modulus, it's negative, and we write with modulus, it's 0.125. Understood, sir? But sir, you told you will highlight two formulas for us. What is the second one? Okay, let me highlight the second one for you. Please pay attention, students. As I told you, EP is percentage change in quantity by percentage change in price. So another formula of EP is, it is derived from the same formula only. It is change in quantity by change in price into original price by original quantity. The magic here is that you are kind of safe from the pain of calculating percentages. You don't need to calculate percentage here. I'll show you how. See, what is the change in quantity? So 600 to 570. Quantity has fallen by how much? By 30. And because of which price has risen by how much? Price has risen by how much? By 40. What was the original price? It was 100. And what was the original quantity? It was 600. If you compute this, you will naturally land up to minus 1 by 8, which was our required answer. Understood, sir? So this way it becomes much easier, right? So to kind of make you jot it down, there are two formulas, I repeat. EP is percentage change in quantity demanded by percentage change in price, or if you don't want to get into the percentage business, you can do something, change in quantity by change in price. Change in quantity is new quantity minus old quantity. Change in price is again new price minus old price into old price by old quantity, and it will be that easy to solve. Understood, sir? Understood, sir? Let's solve a question, huh? Let's solve a question. Let's see. Now notice something. Question 3. The price of a good decreases from 100 to 60. So dear students, original price was 100. New price, dear students, is how much? Come on. New price is, sir, 60. Old price was 100. New price is, sir, how much? New price is 60. Now, if price elasticity of demand is 1.5, now see, they will try to cheat you. They will tell you price elasticity is 1.5. But remember, what did I say? When we present in modulus terms, but when we actually do any calculations, we take in terms of negative. So in reality, this EP will be taken as what? Positive or negative? It will be negative. Only when the question has come, we present it in positive terms. Otherwise, for calculation purposes, we will always take negative value. All right. Original quantity demanded is 30 units, right? So Q1 is 30. Find Q2. That's the question in front of us. What did I teach you, friends? EP is change in quantity by change in price into original price by original quantity. Going by this flow, what is EP? Minus 1.5. Students tend to falter here. They say that, okay, sir, we got 1.5, so we had written 1.5. No, you are to be blamed here. It is in reality a negative value. Now, what is the change in quantity? Friends, quantity has changed from 100, sorry, they haven't given that. That is what we are supposed to find out. Okay. What is the change in price? Price has fallen from 100 to 60. So there is a fall in price. So it will be minus 40 because price has reduced. That's why minus 40. How do we compute change in price? New price minus old price. What is new price? 60. What was the old price? 100. So dear students, 60 minus 100 is, guess what? Minus 40. That's right. So minus 40 we have done here. Now, what was the original price given to us? Original price given to us was 100 and original quantity given to us, as I believe, was 30. Now when we solve it, pay attention. Minus this way gone. Now 1.5 is what we have here. 0 gone, 0 gone, 0 gone, 0 gone. I am sure all of you know this calculation at least. 1.5 into 4 into 3, 12. It comes here, and the change in quantity is by 18. Change in quantity is by how much? By 18 units. Guess what? You have got plus 18 here because it is in positive. So plus 18 means original quantity was 30. So now quantity has increased by plus 18. So the new quantity demanded is, guess what? 48 units. So this is the entire picture of price elasticity of demand as you have it. Now sir, in order to measure price elasticity of demand, let me tell you something. There is not one method. There are multiple methods. The method that we just completed was percentage method, wherein we had basically used percentage change in quantity demanded by percentage change in price, or change in quantity by change in price into original price by original quantity. But guess what? What is the next method? Again, we are in the world of price elasticity of demand, but that was percentage method that we just completed. Now we move to point elasticity method. Point elasticity method is something that is relevant only for the sake of presentation. So what is the presentation formula of this? EP is equals to minus of P by Q. Minus of P by Q means minus of original price by original quantity into, all of you in maths have studied something called derivatives, differentiation as we call it, right? So it would be derivative of price with respect to quantity, that is, or rather the opposite, the derivative of quantity dq by dp. You know why so? It is something you already know. Is that, sir? Yes. What did we study under percentage method? Tell me something. Sir, in percentage method you told us change in quantity by change in price into original price by original quantity. Yes or no? Did I not tell you this? Yes. Just that this delta, it converts to derivative. Instead of this delta, we write d. It again represents change only. So the formula remains the same. But sir, how come you have a negative sign here? Negative sign is used to indicate that normally price elasticity of demand is negative because of inverse relationship between price and quantity. Because of inverse relationship between price and quantity. This is the concept of point elasticity. Another concept of measuring price elasticity is two concepts we have already understood. What are the two concepts? Percentage method done. We have also covered what method? Again, we had covered just now, you see, we had covered point elasticity. Now we move to something called the geometric method. What exactly is the geometric method? A very easy method. Here you draw a demand curve. As you can see, a red line demand curve is drawn. Now to judge elasticity or to compute elasticity at any point, what we do is, to compute elasticity at any point in the demand curve, what we do is, at that point, lower line segment by upper line segment. See how easy geometric method is. EP equals to, repeat after me, EP at any point. EP at any point is what? Lower segment EP at any point is what? Tell me. Lower segment by upper segment. That's it. At that point, it's lower segment by upper segment. So let me give you an example here. You will understand things. Okay. Let's judge elasticity at this point. What is the length of line segment below this point? This is the length of line segment. Suppose this point is A, this point is B. So length of line segment below this point is AB. Yes or no? Come on, tell me. But what is the length of line segment above this? Above this there is no line only. So it will be what? 0. And anything by 0 is what? Tell me. Infinity. So that's why, what did I tell you? Elasticity of demand or price elasticity of demand under the geometric method at this point would be infinity. Would be how much? Infinity. But let's come a little lower. Suppose at this point we have to judge elasticity. Suppose this point is C. Now the length, what is the elasticity value at C? It is length of line segment below C by length of line segment above C. Now you all tell me, is CB greater or CA greater? Obviously CB is greater. When numerator is greater than denominator, then naturally the fraction value is greater than 1. And that's why elasticity at this point is greater than 1. Again, at this point, this is the midpoint of the line. So the lower segment and the upper segment have the same length. Yes. So if this is the x units that is below line, this is this point, and above, and this is also x above this point, both are of equal length. So total it becomes x by x is equals to how much? Come on, 1. It becomes how much? Come on, 1. So at exact middle it is 1. A little lower it is less than 1, and at this point there is nothing below the line. So at this point it is 0 by the entire drawing, that is the entire picture. Upper is entirely AB, so that is 0. So the elasticity at any point under geometric method can be judged as length of line segment below that point by length of line segment above that point. Length of line segment below that point by length of line segment above that point. Yes sir, we have indeed understood this. Guess what? We are still under percentage method. Guess what? We are still under percentage method. We are still discussing price elasticity of demand. We are still under percentage method and we are still discussing price elasticity of demand. Now, what do we talk about? Now we talk about arc elasticity. Now, what do we do in the case of arc elasticity, or what is the world of arc elasticity? See, I will again take you back to the original discussion on percentage method. Under percentage method, how did we learn to compute elasticity? EP equals to, tell me something, what was it? It was change in quantity by change in price into what was it? Original price by original quantity. Here there will be a bit of change, and what would that change be? Friends, here it would be under the particular arc elasticity method, it would be P1, guess what, plus P2 and Q1 plus Q2. This is the extra portion that has come under arc elasticity. That's it. So the formula was similar but not the same. And change in quantity you all already know. It is new quantity minus old quantity. Change in price you all already know. New price minus old price. Okay. So this is what is arc elasticity. So if in exam we get to compute arc elasticity, arc price elasticity, then we just got to remember that we need to add P2 and Q2 and our business is done. Yes sir. Let's take an example. Na? Suppose price was 500 and at that moment the quantity was 100. When price fell to 400, quantity increased to 150. So what is the change in quantity? Quantity has risen by 50 and price has fallen by 100 as usual. Now what is the sum? Change in quantity by change in price into change in quantity by change in price into sum of price. What is the sum of 500 and 400? Tell me. 900. And what is the sum of 100 and 150? Tell me. 250. Bus, there it is. 100, 9, 55. 9 by 5 is 1.8, so it's minus 1.8. And when presented in terms of absolute values, it is modulus 1.8 or positive 1.8. There it is. There it is. It is this basic. It is so easy. Yes, sir, we have understood this. Yes, sir, we have understood this. Now, one interesting thing that comes up, and therefore I need you to be aware of the same, is something called slope of demand curve. In exam, you can get to find out the slope of demand curve. So remember, the formula for slope of demand curve is change in price by change in quantity, and we keep it negative. Sir, why do we keep it negative? Because there is inverse relation between price and quantity. So this is the slope of demand curve. Remember, change in price by change in quantity. All right, and negative because there is inverse relationship between price and quantity. Naturally it will be negative. Sir, we understand this. Now we are studying is 5 types of price elasticity of demand. What we are studying now is 5 types of price elasticity of demand. So sir, there are how many types of price elasticity of demand? Come on, there are 5 types of price elasticity of demand. Number one, and let's talk about each one of them. Okay, number one is perfectly inelastic demand. So what is perfectly inelastic demand? Listen carefully. When there is no change in demand despite change in price, that is called perfectly inelastic demand. Repeat after me. When there is no change in demand despite change in price, that is called perfectly inelastic demand. Also, we need to know the diagram of it. This is the case of perfectly inelastic demand. It is a vertical curve parallel to y-axis. Its elasticity will be 0. And it's very easy to understand once you understand the concept. What did I say? What am I teaching you? I am teaching you perfectly inelastic demand. Now when I teach you perfectly inelastic demand, what do I mean? It means that despite change in price, there is no change in quantity. So think of the formula. What was the formula of EP? Percentage change in quantity by percentage change in price. Come on, if there is no change in quantity, then naturally the numerator is 0. 0 by anything is 0. So this is the case of perfectly inelastic demand. Understood, sir? Sir, is there any example? Though perfectly inelastic example, exact example I cannot give, but a close example I can give is medicine. Suppose I am taking 2 tablets of medicine every day. Suppose, or some of your parent or grandparents, anyone is taking 2 tablets of medicine every day. So if price of the medicine is doubled, will you reduce the quantity consumption of medicine? No. So despite change in price, there is no change in quantity. This is the case of perfectly inelastic demand. Everything is practical. Now, sir, what is inelastic demand or relatively inelastic demand? Friends, when we talk about relatively inelastic demand, it means that price is also changing, quantity is also changing. But who is changing with a greater percentage? Quantity is changing with a lesser percentage, price is changing with a greater percentage. So when percentage change in price, come on, when percentage change in price is greater than percentage change in quantity, suppose price has increased by 20%, but due to increase in price by 20%, quantity has fallen only by 5%. So which one has shown greater change? Price has shown greater change compared to quantity, and that is why I refer to it as what? Relatively inelastic demand, because price change with a greater percentage, with a greater vigor. And here the value of elasticity, we talk about modulus, we talk only about modulus. It will be great, it will be lesser than 1, it will be lesser than 1. And how will the demand curve look like? So sir, for rather inelastic demand, for elasticity less than 1, it will be a steep curve, steep or a narrow curve, steep or a narrow curve. So if you get a steep or a narrow curve, please know that elasticity is less than 1. I can also explain it to you logically. You want to understand that logically? Yes, sir. EP is what? Percentage change in quantity by percentage change in price. Now apply some common sense. Who is changing with a greater percentage in case of inelastic demand? Who is showing a greater change in case of inelastic demand? Greater change is shown by price. So if denominator is greater than numerator, if denominator is greater than the numerator, come on, tell me, Tell me something. If denominator is greater than numerator, will the fraction be 1 or less than 1? It will be less than 1. For example, 5% by 10%. So naturally it is 0.5, which is less than 1. Sir, we have understood this indeed. Sir, we have indeed understood this. Now, having understood this one, that is relatively inelastic demand, it brings me to my next discussion, which is unit elastic demand or unit elasticity demand. There are 5 types. Number 1 was perfectly inelastic. Number 2 was relatively inelastic. Now it is unitary elastic. When there is equal change in both, that is percentage change in price is the same as percentage change in quantity. Friends, when the percentage change in price is equal to the percentage change in quantity, we are in the world of unitary elastic demand. So suppose price has changed by 10%, demand has also changed by 10%. This is called unitary because here elasticity value is 1. Arey, come on. If both numerator and denominator are same, both are changing by same percentage, then what will be the value? It will naturally be 1. In such a case, the diagram that you get is called a rectangular hyperbola. It's called a rectangular hyperbola. So one may ask you that, or for what kind of demand curve do you see a rectangular hyperbola? So remember, it is the case of unitary elastic demand. Or what is the shape of unitary elastic demand curve? So remember, the shape is called rectangular hyperbola. Rectangular hyperbola. Rectangular hyperbola. In your syllabus, there is yet another concept called average fixed cost. Remember, average fixed cost also has a shape of rectangular hyperbola, though it is not related to this concept here. Just trying to remind you. Now, we talk about relatively elastic demand. That is the 4th variety. In case of relatively elastic demand, now demand is going to change at a greater percentage than change in price. Now who is going to change with a greater percentage? Demand. And for that curve, you get a flat curve. You get a flat curve. You remember when we were discussing inelastic demand, the curve was steep. Now see, the curve is relatively flatter. So you get a flatter curve when you are talking about elasticity greater than 1. So in case of relatively elastic demand, what happens? Percentage change in demand is greater than percentage change in price. Percentage change in demand, quantity demanded, is greater than percentage change in price. Then you are in this world of relatively elastic demand. And what is infinity, sir? When do we get infinity? When we have perfectly elastic demand. When despite no change in price, when there has been no change in price, but demand has changed, that is called perfectly elastic demand. And remember, the shape of perfectly elastic demand is a horizontal curve and its value will be infinity. So perfectly elastic demand value of elasticity is infinity and it is a horizontal curve parallel to x-axis. Yes, sir. Sir, when does it happen? When there is no change in price, but there is change in demand. But sir, is it possible at all? Yes, it is possible. Can I give you an example? Yes, you can give us an example. Suppose price has remained constant, but income of the consumer has increased. So price has remained constant, but income has increased. So will the demand rise or not? Yes, the demand will rise. That is the case of infinite elasticity. When it comes to price elasticity, when it comes to price elasticity, when it comes to price elasticity. Yes, sir, we definitely have understood this part. Yes, sir, we definitely have understood this part. Very good. Congratulations. Now pay attention, everyone. Now pay attention, everyone. Having done this much, we discuss total expenditure method or total outlay method of calculating price elasticity. Just imagine, we have caught hold to price elasticity. We discussed so many methods. We discussed percentage method. Then we discussed point elasticity method. Then we discussed geometric method. Then we discussed arc elasticity method. 4 types done. Now we come to what? The 5th method, which is called total expenditure or total outlay method. It is a very easy method. Do you want to understand? Sir, first of all, what is total outlay or what is total expenditure? It is nothing but price into quantity. What is total outlay or total expenditure? It is nothing but price into quantity. Simple. It is simple. Simple concept. Now, pay attention everyone. Suppose if there is a rise in price, dear, come on. If there is a rise in price and because of rise in price, there is a rise in total expenditure, or if there is a fall in price because of which there is a fall in total expenditure, that is price and total expenditure are moving in the same direction, that is the case of inelastic demand. Here there are only three types. Here there are not five types. Here there are only three types. This is the case of, repeat, inelastic demand. So the value of elasticity in this case will be lesser than 1. When? When there is a direct relation between price and total expenditure. Come on, when there is a direct relationship between price and total expenditure. But suppose there is an inverse relationship. So a rise in price has resulted in fall in total expenditure, or a fall in price has resulted in a rise in total expenditure. So don't you see an inverse relationship here? Yes sir, we do see there is an inverse relationship here. Friends, when you notice this kind of inverse relationship, guess what? Guess which world are you in? Friends, then you are in the world of elastic demand. So whenever you see inverse relationship between price and expenditure, that is a case of elastic demand. The value of elasticity will be greater than 1. Understood? Yes sir. But when, despite increase or reduction in price, there is no change in total expenditure, repeat, there is no change in total expenditure, we call this to be unitary elastic demand. Here elasticity value is exactly equal to 1. So when, despite increase or decrease in price, there is no change in total expenditure, we call it to be what? Repeat after me. We call it to be a case of unitary elastic demand. We call it to be a case of unitary elastic demand. So let me elaborate it for you again. So when rise in price and total expenditure reduces, or when price falls, total expenditure rises, then what demand are we trying to discuss? We are discussing elastic demand. Elastic demand has value of elasticity greater than 1. But when they are in the same direction, that the rise in price leads to rise in expenditure or fall in price leads to fall in expenditure, then we are in the world of what? Come on, tell me. Then we are in the world of inelastic demand. Here it is less than 1. But if there is a rise or there is a fall in price, but there is no change in total expenditure, then guess what? You are in the world of unitary elastic demand. Here the value of EP is exactly equal to 1. So friends, these were some of the methods that is used to discuss the different types of elasticity, or to measure different types of price elasticity, right? We have completed total expenditure method, we have computed percentage method, we have computed arc elasticity method, we have computed geometric method, we have computed point method. Yes sir, so 5 methods we have understood. So having understood this much, let me tell you something. The question can come from, what are the factors affecting not this time demand? Pay attention. Factors affecting price elasticity of demand. I will tell you a secret trick here. Look at the consumer. Can the consumer show more attitude towards the producer? If the consumer can have more attitude, elasticity is high. It is called elastic demand. But if the consumer cannot show attitude, it is the case of inelastic demand. I repeat, sir, but what are you saying? What kind of explanation is this? Just keep patience and listen. When the consumer is in a position to bargain, when the consumer is in a position to kind of shift to different alternatives, then it is elastic demand. But if the consumer cannot, it is the case of inelastic demand. Now let me explain it how. Availability of substitutes. Pay attention. There can be two cases where substitutes are available and when substitutes are not available. So for a product that I am selling, if there are substitutes that are available, then demand will be what? Demand will be what? Come on. Demand will be, remember here the consumer can show attitude. So here the demand is going to be elastic in nature. Why? Because even if one producer is selling at a higher price, consumer can definitely shift to other producer. So it is the case of elastic demand. But if no substitute is available, for example metro, railways run by Indian government. There is no substitute for that, close substitute for that. In that case, the demand is going to be what? Inelastic. What technique did I tell you? Whether the consumer can change their demand aggressively or not. If the consumer can change their demand aggressively, it is elastic. Because if when substitutes are available, consumer can easily shift. So consumer can easily change their demand to somebody else. That is a case of elastic demand. But if consumers can't shift because there is no close substitute only, it is the case of inelastic demand. Understood, sir? Now, position of a commodity in consumer's budget. Now there can be two things. Consumer spends huge sum on some products and consumer spends small amount on some products. I'll give you an example. Suppose in your basically, if you are in a college, or suppose you are kind of buying a house, you are going to spend a lot of money. You are going to spend a lot of money, so you will take a lot of decisions. So here the attitude of consumers will be high and the demand is going to be what? Tell me. Elastic. But suppose you are buying a packet of salt or you are buying a small packet of matchbox. Do they cost a lot? No. So even if their price changes, will their demand change a lot? No. So for that, the demand is going to be inelastic. Remember, when there is a high scope for change in demand, it is the case of elastic demand. But when there is little scope for change in demand, it is a case of inelastic demand. That is the secret formula. Now, nature of the commodity, a very important point indeed. See, there can be two things. Commodity can be a necessity. For example, food, house. So for these things, even if the price changes, can the consumer change the demand by much? No, because these are necessities. So the demand for necessities is what? Inelastic in nature, because the consumers have to buy it to sustain their lifestyle or to sustain their living. But when it's a luxury, is it necessary for life? No. So consumers can kind of bargain. So the demand for such commodities is going to be elastic. Luxuries have elastic demand therefore. Another point that we need to cater here is number of uses to which a commodity can be put. So remember one thing, if a product has more uses, greater the number of uses, greater the elasticity. If the product has less uses, elasticity will be low. If more uses, more elasticity, less uses, less elasticity. Sir, we have understood, sir. Yes, sir. Habits, a very important point. So suppose somebody is a chain smoker, they have a habit of consuming that product. So even if the price of cigarette rises, will their demand change? No, because they have a habit. So if you are habituated to using a product, then the demand for that product for you will be inelastic. That is, it won't change much because of price. Understood, sir? But if suppose you are not habituated to using a product, in that case the demand would be what? Elastic. Because if the price rises, you might stop using that product. Sir, we have understood. Sir, we have understood. Price range. If the price of a product is very little, demand will be inelastic. But if price is very high, demand will be elastic, because there the consumer will have to think a lot before buying that product. Now, price elasticity of demand, is over. Let me tell you a good news. If you have understood price elasticity, you have understood other elasticities. In price elasticity under percentage method, what formula did you study? Percentage change in demand by percentage change in own price. So in income elasticity, percentage change in demand by percentage change in income. Other things remaining the same. Sir, it's very easy this way. Exactly my point. Exactly my point. Now here, there can be, three different cases which I want to highlight for you all. Sir, what is that case? Remember, for a normal good, tell me, for normal goods, income elasticity will be what? For normal goods, income elasticity will be positive. You know why? Because we had studied, if there is a rise in income, for example, normal goods like clothes, we will buy more. If there is a rise in income, normal goods like clothes, we will buy more. So when we talk about normal goods, they have positive income elasticity. But talk about inferior goods. Tell me something. Friends, if my income rises, will my demand for inferior goods rise or fall? It will fall, because now I will shift to better alternatives. So for inferior goods, remember, income elasticity is negative. For inferior goods, income elasticity is negative. And generally for inexpensive necessities, there is zero income elasticity. There is zero income elasticity. Meaning what, sir? Suppose my income rises. Inexpensive necessity means salt. So if my income rises, will I start buying more salt? Will I start putting more salt to my food? Definitely not, sir. So there will be no change in demand despite change in income. Thus, income elasticity in such a case would be zero. In what cases, sir? In the case of inexpensive necessities, income elasticity would be zero. Sir, we have understood. So income elasticity was rather very easy, sir, to understand. Let's talk about cross price elasticity of demand. Another interesting thing. What happens here is, the formula here is again same. Percentage change in quantity demanded by percentage change in price. How? Sir, this formula you have written, it is of price elasticity of demand. No, it is also of cross price elasticity. The only difference is, in price elasticity of demand, we were talking about the same product. So it was percentage change in quantity of car by percentage change in price of car. But here, percentage change in quantity of car, and in denominator there is some other product. Percentage change in price of, let's say, petrol. That is called cross elasticity of demand. So cross elasticity is basically telling us the degree of responsiveness of quantity demanded, not due to own price, but due to price of related commodities. There are mainly two types of related commodities: complementary goods and substitute goods. For example, complementary example we just discussed in the case of demand, that car and petrol are complementary because they are used together. So for complementary goods, remember, for complementary goods, cross elasticity will be negative. For complementary goods, cross elasticity will be negative. You know why? Because increase in price of one will lead to reduction in demand of the other. So if car becomes expensive, demand for petrol will go down. So therefore there is negative relationship between these two, and therefore for complementary goods, cross elasticity is negative. But when it comes to, dear students, substitute goods, example tea and coffee that we just discussed. So if price of tea rises, then people will start buying more of coffee. So there is a direct relationship. So for substitute goods, cross elasticity of demand is positive. For substitute goods, cross elasticity of demand is positive. For substitute goods, cross elasticity of demand is positive. Everyone, for substitute goods, cross elasticity of demand is positive. Yes, sir, we have indeed understood this. And this is the main part that needs to be highlighted. If two goods are perfect substitutes for each other, cross elasticity between them is infinity. When they are perfect substitutes, if they are close substitutes, the cross elasticity will be positive but large. If two are not close substitutes, cross elasticity will be positive but small. But if the two goods are totally unrelated, for example, car and salt, the cross elasticity between them is zero. And when it comes to complementary, it will be negative. When it comes to complementary, it will be negative. So there is negative cross elasticity when it comes to complementary goods. There is negative cross elasticity for complementary goods. Yes, sir, we have indeed understood this. Let's take an example, okay? The price of 1 kg of tea is 30. So P1 is 30. At this price, 5 kg of tea is demanded. Q1 is 5. if price of coffee rises from 25 to 35, oh my god, so price of coffee is how much? 25 original price. And what is the new price of coffee? The new price of coffee is 35. Because of this, quantity of demanded of tea has risen from 5 kg to 8 kg. Find out the cross price elasticity of tea. So what is the change in quantity demanded? What is the formula? Change in quantity by change in price into original price by original quantity. So what is the change in quantity of tea? It has increased by 3. But wait, what is the change in price? Not of tea, but of coffee. Here we take two different commodities. So it has increased by 10. So 3 divided by 10 into what was the original price of coffee? 25. What was the original quantity consumed of tea? That was 5. So when you kind of compute it, everyone, you put 5 here. So 5, 5, 5, 3, 15, 15 by 10, 1.5. As I told you, you get positive 1.5. Remember, in cross elasticity, quantity will be of another commodity and price will be of another commodity. If it is of the same commodity, then it is price elasticity, not cross price elasticity. Sir, what is advertisement elasticity? Again, what is the impact on demand due to advertisement? Formula is percentage change in quantity demanded by percentage change in advertisement. And normally advertisement elasticity will be what? Positive, because more the expenditure, more the demand for that product will rise. Normally this is what happens, right sir? But if advertisement elasticity is 0, it means what? Advertisement has no impact on demand. If it is greater than 0 but less than 1, then yes, the demand has increased, but not with the same vigor as the advertisement. If it is exactly 1, it means that if, you know, I increased my expenditure by 10%, my demand also increased by 10%. And if it is greater than 1, it means I increased my expenditure on advertisement by 10%, but my demand for the product increased by more than 10%. Understood, sir? And you know what? This brings us to the end of topic elasticity of demand in totality. Yes, there is going to be another session called MCQ Express, wherein we will discuss a lot of MCQs.